In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove and replace your fuel regulator on a Toyota Camry, located on the back side of the engine, connected to the fuel rail, which is behind the valve cover. We're going to go ahead and pull the EFI fuse, which is electronic fuel injector. This is the fuse box where it's located, right next to the battery in the engine compartment. Just pop that little clip and hold this one back, pull it up. If you turn it over real quick, you'll see that number 15 amp EFI is right there. It's right below the 7.5 amp spare. So if I come over here and look inside the fuse box, I'll see the 7.5 right there, and there's my 15 amp. Just going to pull that out. Now with that pulled out, set it aside. I'm going to go in and crank the car over. It will not start. I want to crank it till I feel there's no more pressure left in the system. Now that we're done relieving the fuel pressure, we're going to take that negative battery terminal off. Disconnect the negative on the battery cable. If you have a factory terminal, it will look like this, and it'll be a 10mm wrench. I have an aftermarket universal, so 1/2 inch. Set it aside, make sure it doesn't pop up and touch that battery. So the location of that fuel regulator, like I said, is behind the valve cover, below this part of the intake. You'll see it right here at the very end of the fuel rail. It's got this vacuum hose going into it, and it looks like a quarter-size moon valve. And what we're going to do first is take that vacuum line off. You might need a pair of pliers. You just want to carefully move it so that you don't rip the rubber. We don't want to cause a vacuum leak. Okay. All right, so now that you have the vacuum line off, it just gives you a little bit better view. And back here is the banjo bolt that holds the fuel line on that regulator. That's going to be a 12mm wrench or socket. In this case, I'm going to recommend a wrench. I have a flexible ratchet wrench that I'm going to put on there. See if I can break this free. There we go. Just took a little effort. I held the back of it with like a pry bar. You can use a long screwdriver or a pry bar. We'll just keep holding it. I do have a catch basin down below to grab any residual fuel. All right. Let's see if I can get my hands in there. Let's see if we can get that banjo bolt out. There it is. Here's the banjo bolt. Set that aside. Now we're going to break free our 2 mounting bolts. One on the top and one on the bottom. That's a 10mm socket head or wrench. Ooh. Now we'll go to the top one. There we go. Probably do it by hand now. There's the top one. Set it aside. And let's get to that bottom one. They're so easy to come out. I've noticed that about Toyota fuel bolts for some reason. Like the rails, so hold the injectors on, everything. Once they break free, they come right out. That's the second one. Now we can grab that fuel regulator and pop it right out of the rail. It should have an O-ring, so pry bar or screwdriver, just kind of give it a little pull. And there we go. There's the fuel regulator. All right, so before you install your fuel regulator, make sure you have a new O-ring on there and it seats properly. It's in that groove. And now we're going to go ahead and place it in. It goes in this way. That is the fuel rail, and that's the mounting, and then the line connects right there. Find the whole mounting bracket, right? Pops right in, real nice and easy. So now I'm going to take my mounting screws, put them in by hand. The bottom one in, just snugging them up before we torque them. It's not a hard regulator to do. The challenge is going to be the banjo bolt and making sure the washers stay on. You're going to put your first washer on, make sure it goes all the way down, seated, and you're going to bring that banjo bolt back under that fuel line. So what I did here is I put a rag or something right here underneath that, so if it does drop, whether it's an O-ring, either washer or the bolt, it won't go far, so we can catch it. Because this is kind of an angle that's not the easiest to get at. So I'm gonna just line that bolt up. I'm gonna see if I can use the pry bar or long screwdriver to act like my second hand. Okay, now let the games begin, because we now have to get this secondary washer on there. Let's see if I can get this washer down in there. Once that gets started, I'm going to bottom that right out, and I'm going to tighten down the regulator to the fuel rail, and then we'll snug up that line. So the key is, when you're putting those two bolts on, is to go back and forth equally. You don't want to tighten one down and then go to the other. You'll break the ear or misalign that O-ring and actually tear it. So go back and forth to the top and the bottom bolt on even turns. All right, so we're going to get that bottom one. Turn it a couple of turns, and move to the top. Okay, now I'm going to get a nice long ratchet, give those a tightening. There is no torque specs, but because there's 6mm bolts, I'm just going to bottom them out and give them a nice quarter turn. Should be perfectly fine. Okay, they're bottomed out, quarter turn, same with the bottom. Okay, now let's get to that banjo bolt. Okay, so I'm going to hold it with the pry bar, so I'm going to try to get this to bottom out, really snug that up. You want to crush those washers. Make sure they bottom out. Let's get the rag out of there. I'm going to put our vacuum line back on. I'm going to spray that down with a little bit of water in a bottle just to soak it up. Make sure there's no residue of gasoline before I plug in the fuse and connect the battery. So now we can reinstall that EFI fuse. That was that 15 amp fuse right below that 7.5, right here behind that relay. Push it down in, make sure it's all the way in. We put the cover back on. Now you're going to take the negative cable, put it back on the post. I like to wiggle it down, make sure that that post stands above the terminal. That's a big problem that some people don't realize. Mine's a 12mm because it's already been replaced aftermarket. Factory should be a 10mm wrench or socket. The key also is to hold the terminal end, pull up on it while you push down so you don't bend that lead post. Make sure it's nice and snug. Good to go. Now all we need to do is cycle that key on and off several times just to build pressure up. Do not start it. And then you can take a look at that fuel regulator and make sure there's no leaks on that line. If it's all set, you're ready to go. If not, re-torque or retighten. When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.